It's called Murder Hole. I did some research, and so that hole in the ceiling is the murder hole, a mutilliere. And so that's where the people in the castle could throw rocks or shoot arrows or dump boiling oil or whatever. It's a source of unexpected death. So it's a hole in the ceiling. So as I mentioned, if you're going in our cave and you're in that middle section, and I said if it looks like you could slide on your butt and get to the next floor, but that there's a hole in that floor that opens up to the third level, that hole is the murder hole. It's a source of unexpected death. I'm Marion McConnell, and my husband Dano and I met and fell in love in Catawba, actually. Catawba is kind of like a Garden of Eden, just on the other side of the Appalachian Trail, on the other side of the mountains from Roanoke, Virginia. It's a beautiful valley, very pristine. There are some churches here. Used to be a nice restaurant, a general store, but they're kind of vacant right now because of COVID. But it's just kind of still untouched by, you know, the booming businesses and things like that. And we were driving around and saying someday, if it works out between us, wouldn't we love to have a little piece of land here? Unbeknownst to us, we learned about and heard about a murder hole cave. We're like, what is that? And a real estate agent said, yeah, you ought to come, it's for sale. There's 60-something acres in Catawba. We're in Catawba, Virginia. Come check it out. And there's a cave on it, and we mistakenly thought it was up on Catawba Mountain, which would be too steep to build a house. But when he drove us out here, and we got out of our car and looked into a pit that you could fit an 8-story building into, we were both just speechless. And so the property sat for sale for a long time. People didn't want the responsibility and didn't really understand a lot about what it meant to have a cave on your property. But we feel like it was meant to be. My husband was involved in rescue and heavy tactical rescue type of things and rock climbing, and he had done some caving. And so we ended up buying the property in 1994. And did a lot of research about it. We wanted to know the story about it. We met the owners, the Thomases, Ashby and Sam Thomas, and he told us some wild stories about it. It had been in their family, and they have other relatives in the area. They have a son and daughter. The son-in-law is still around, but Ashby was quite a character. He was very interested in caves and caving, and he would tell us stories about going with his buddies into the murder hole and throwing rocks down holes to see if a passage went. There's another cave up near Dragon's Tooth called Miller's Cove Cave. He told us a story about going with his buddy to try to enlarge the entrance, so they set up some dynamite sticks inside the entrance and ran the wire out to the surface, and when they pushed the plunger, nothing happened. So they didn't know what to do then. Do you go back in the cave? And I heard from some other cavers, when they'd go back years later, there was some old rotting dynamite sticks laying on the ledge up there. But anyway, we became very good friends, Ashby and Sam, and they knew that we fell in love with this whole area and that we wanted to be good stewards, to take care of it, to appreciate going in the cave, that we were the type of people who are cavers and go in and explore and share it with people, but do it safely and also respect it. Because in the past, there are remnants of where people had broken formations off or spray painted. Somebody painted the word hell on one of the walls inside Murder Hole and have an arrow pointing downward into the hole that goes to the lower level. And then I started doing research and ended up putting a book together about it. But what we did throughout that whole time was explore the cave, meet people who are in a caving club. We have a Blue Ridge Grotto Caving Club, which is part of the National Caving Organization called National Speleological Society. But learned as much as we could to be good stewards of this very unique place that's in this part of Virginia. It is in Botetourt County, And Botetourt County is one place where I went to the courthouse to find out who'd owned it before. I went to the Roanoke Times to find out what newspaper articles were written about people who had gotten trapped in Murder Hole, had to be rescued, which there were quite a few. Got police reports about the man who died in the cave back in 1958. So there's a whole story about him. So I love to find out the stories, and felt it, because I was able to start documenting those and preserve those for whoever would end up with the property when we're no longer here, when our ashes are thrown into the murder hole. I was able to get a map that had been restored through the Botetourt History Museum in Fincastle, and that's in the book too. And so the map is, I believe, 1770 to the mid 1800s, and it shows where Craig, Botetourt, and Roanoke County all come together. And on that map, it's got the murder hole, right? It's right there on the map. So that's the oldest documented thing that I could find that went back to at least the 1700s. The beauty of Murder Hole, one of the beauties, is that you can literally drive up to the edge of the pit, as you did today, and walk around the rim of it and see at least the top third. So that way you're appreciating what an amazing place it is without having to go in. When you're looking at the cave from our driveway, you see a pit that you could fit an 8-story building into. It's over 120 feet deep, about 100 feet across and wide, and it takes ropes to get in and out, and that's the top third. Once you're down on that floor level, you have to squeeze through either the screw hole or squeeze through Fat Man Squeeze to get to the middle level of the cave. And from there, it looks like you could slide on your butt down to a floor that's about 75 feet below you. But what you cannot see from the top is if you're not on a rope and you're sliding on your butt, it turns, because of the way the water flows, which created the cave, it turns and you would fall at the bottom. There's a hole that opens up to the third level, 75 feet below. So that's the third level. So it takes 3 ropes to get all the way to the deepest part of the murder hole. All that being said, this is on private property. So for human protection and for the cave protection, we only let people go in the cave or come see the cave if we are here, if they have permission. And if they're going in the cave, they have to be with us or one of our caving folks who are experienced in that.
Sure.
Gravity can get you down into about anything, but getting out, if you don't know how to ascend ropes a safe way, and we don't want any more bodies down in there. Another thing about caves that people who don't go caving may not know is that caves are the average temperature of the area, if you take the average of every temperature during the whole year. So in Virginia, caves are 54 degrees, around 54, 55 degrees. So it can be 100 degrees up here, a hot, hot summer day, and when you get down into the actual dark part of the cave, it's only 54. So you can die of hypothermia, of cold, if you're not properly dressed, properly prepared on a 100-degree day, because you're in a place which is like going to a different planet. So it's also, you have to have the right gear, you have to take food and water, you have to even leave a callback with someone to let, though we own the cave, when we go caving, we let a responsible person know, if you don't hear from us by this time and this date, contact the rescue authorities because something has happened. So even though we own the cave, something can always happen with us too. So we have a gear trailer, and inside that trailer is camping gear, hiking gear, but it's also rescue gear, like a litter, the ropes, the ascenders, all the different technical stuff it would take. And we actually have mock rescues. We have people, we'll have a practice session where someone pretends to be hurt, and our team has to work to prepare them to get them out safely. So when we have to do real rescues, we have teams that know how to do that. You can't just call someone up and pull an ambulance next to someone, and you can't use a cell phone in a cave. It's like going to a different planet to do a rescue.
hole.
It's called Murder Hole. I did some research. So the best explanation I could find is that if you go over to England, Ireland, Scotland, and you're going to invade a castle, you're back in the castle days, and you make it across the moat, there will be a door, and if you break down that door, you're in a small antechamber with another door, but there's a hole in the ceiling. And so that hole in the ceiling is the murder hole, a meurtrière. And so that's where the people in the castle could throw rocks or shoot arrows or dump boiling oil or whatever. It's a source of unexpected death. So it's a hole in the ceiling. So as I mentioned, if you're going in our cave and you're in that middle section, and I said if it looks like you could slide on your butt and get to the next floor, but that there's a hole in that floor that opens up to the third level, that hole is the murder hole. It's a source of unexpected death. So that's kind of where we think the name came from. I guess the main story about Murder Hole would be about David Spencer, who was with Virginia Tech and their caving club. And they came back in 1958 to practice rappelling out at that entrance pit that you can see from the driveway. Back in those days, they used manila rope, which is made out of hemp. It's plant fiber. They didn't have the nylon ropes like we had. And so they rigged a rope, and he was the first person to start rappelling. That means going down the rope into the pit you can see from the driveway. He hadn't gone very far when all of a sudden the rope just broke, and he fell to his death. And they had to do what's called a recovery, a body recovery. And so, as is talked about in the book, in the police report, they found that where their caving equipment was stored at Tech in a special closet, someone accidentally put a bottle of toilet bowl cleaner in the closet and it leaked. Those chemicals got on that manila rope, and that's why the rope broke. So his picture and his story are in the book and in the movie too, with the movie that we made. One of the earliest legends I could find, and has not been proven, but it claimed that back in the early 1900s, a tinker was coming through Catawba Valley with his wagon and his horse-drawn wagon and his wares and things. And supposedly a farmer got greedy, murdered the tinker man, and made sure his body and the wagon, after he stole all the good stuff, went into the cave, into the pit to get demolished. And that's one of the legends. So that's never been proven.
No remains found.
No remains found. There's also a legend that perhaps the Beale treasure is hidden in there.
Tell me more about that.
So that's a Civil War legend, and even Mel Fisher, the famous treasure hunter, has looked for that. More likely that was put in a cave or buried out near Goose Creek toward Bedford, but various people have kind of said, hey, isn't the Beale treasure hidden in Murder Hole? Well, we've never found it. We've never found treasure, that kind of treasure.
You wouldn't tell anybody if you did.
You'd probably be sitting in a much bigger house and, that type of thing, but that's never been proven. But honestly, especially back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, let's say before cell phones were invented, where people were just doing nothing but this, quite a few, usually teenage boys, would sneak out of the house, a couple of them, 2 or 3, with a piece of clothesline and a flashlight and decide they're going to go explore Murder Hole. And being unprepared and unequipped and everything, quite a few of them had to be rescued out because they could get down into something, but they didn't realize it's very hard, if not impossible, to hand over hand up a 75-foot rope when you're cold and wet and you're tired and you're probably scared to death. There were some injuries. Nothing. I think the most serious was a young woman who slid off the side there. She got too close to the edge, and apparently she broke a hip and stuff. And I was able to contact her. That was probably back in the 50s, 60s, but she declined, so I respected that. But not really any deaths that we know of. And we try to make sure no more happen. That's why we're very protective and don't let people in unless we know they're going to be safe. Probably the oldest thing we found, it more relates to paleontology is one of the other caves on our property. We found, one of our caving friends found some teeth, and we have paleontologists in the caving community. One worked at the Smithsonian, and he identified them, and I have one tooth. It's the upper molar of a bison back when bison roamed Catawba. So that kind of thing. As far as finding artifacts in the cave, it's usually old batteries, trash left by previous folks, and that's another kind of thing to learn too, is people, especially the media, loves to use the term spelunker. Well, we consider ourselves cavers, and our saying is cavers rescue spelunkers. So you say, well, what's the difference? Well, a caver gets permission from the owner, doesn't trespass, dresses appropriately, respects the environment, doesn't damage anything, is very safe, does things all the right way to be safe, both for people in the cave. A spelunker is more like those teenage boys who take a piece of clothesline and a flashlight, and we end up going in having to rescue them. So it kind of tips us off if someone, and this just happened to me a couple days ago, I got an email from someone and it said, hey, I'm a spelunker, can you tell me how I can get into Murder Hole? And I said, well, it tells me right away, it's kind of a secret password, it tells me right away they're not a caver. And so I pointed this person to the National Caving website, the caves.org website, and told him how to contact his local grotto. And I said every cave belongs to someone, so to be safe, you would have to go through us. And you can come out and see it from the driveway, but I can't take you in until I kind of know what your abilities are, that type of thing.
Sure.
So cavers rescue spelunkers. There are over 4,200 known wild caves in Virginia, and that is from the mountains to the west where caves form. And so caves generally form in limestone, or what's called karst, K-A-R-S-T, terrain. And so it's basically caused by the water that's eroding this porous limestone and creating, voids, and then building up the formations with the various minerals and things that, like calcite, that are in the water. They aren't altered by human beings. So they're going to have tight passages. They may be vertical. There's no steps. So for example, for Murder Hole, to get down in the first section, to do it safely, you have to have ropes. You have to have special gear. You always need to wear helmets. There could be loose rocks. You may slip. You may fall. We wear knee pads. We wear coveralls. And take packs. We take our own food and water, extra batteries, always a bunch of extra light sources, because it's completely dark in a cave. And so it is like, think about if you were going to another planet, what you would need to have, and then know which things don't work. Cell phone doesn't work in a cave. And so what we also do for people who want to find out about caving is we say, start first with commercial caves, and that means caves that have lights and handrails and stairs, and we've got nearby, closest to us is Dixie Caverns, then we have Natural Bridge Caverns, there's Grand, there's Luray, there's all kinds of wonderful commercial caves, and you don't have to have special gear, just wear a jacket. But then if you want to go into wild caves, which require much more, you want to start with people who are experienced, like our people at the Blue Ridge Grotto, and start with what are called horizontal caves. They don't require ropes. They still require knowing how to move safely and the whole respect thing and dressing, but then and work up to something like the Murder Hole would be. If you're comparing it to if you wanted to run a marathon, you don't do a marathon first. You start with a fun run, then a 1 mile run, then a 5K, 10K, and you work up to it. So Murder Hole is more like a marathon. Well, I would say being empowered by it. If someone had told me back before I got into caving that you're going to go in these caves and you're going to rappel down it, I would have said, that can't be me. I would never do. But it's amazing what things you're able to do when you learn from knowledgeable people, experienced people, and you practice your skills and that type of thing, and how empowering it is and how eye-opening it is. Virginia, for example, this area of Virginia is beautiful. I mean, every season is gorgeous and everything, and that's all what you can see above the surface. But when you realize that there are caves that are gorgeous and have all these amazing formations and passageways and rivers and creeks, it's doubled what you can see because it's all underground. And then when you come, one thing we like to say is there's nothing better than going into a cave and having a great time, but also nothing better than coming out safely. I survived that. I did that. And so both my husband, Dano, and I have worked for decades for the Roanoke City Parks and Recreation, and would take beginners on beginner and intermediate caving trips. And it's so encouraging and thrilling to take kids of any age, kids from 5 to 95 really, into a place that they've never seen before and that they have certain probably misconceptions of, like bats. You know, a lot of people, if you say bats, if they don't know anything about them, they're like, oh, bats, that's scary. But really, the most dangerous creature in a cave is a person who doesn't know what they're doing. Because the critters that we see, bats, salamanders, all those different things, we can hurt them accidentally, obviously, more than they would hurt us. So it's watching the kids, and especially kids who don't get out a lot or maybe never been in a cave, and they have a certain picture in their mind what it's going to be like, and they can't just sit and watch it. It's not like watching TV. They have to crawl and climb, and we really use teamwork a lot. We're huge on teamwork. And so we took a lot of Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, church groups, you know, other folks, and to see their eyes open, to realize what they've seen, what's there where they live, but also what they can do and what you can do with people around you that are helping each other out. One super interesting thing to me when I was doing research for the book was there was a book made by Helen Perlman called Places Near the Mountains, and it was about Catawba, and in it was a chapter all about Murder Hole. And John Long, who used to be the head of the Salem Museum, you know, to kind of turn me on. It's out of print, but I have kind of a copy of it now. And the funny thing was, there are pictures from in Murder Hole in that book, but I could tell as a caver, whoever put the book together didn't know much about caves, because some of them were upside down and some of them were sideways. Formations don't grow sideways, but I was able to contact through that book, the daughter of a man named George von Cromer. And George lived here in Catawba. He loved Murder Hole in between 1900 and the 1920s. He went into Murder Hole, and we, thanks to his daughter and his grandson, they found his scrapbook up in the attic. And so we have those pictures in the book and in the first part of the movie, the documentary that we made. And so the cave itself hasn't really aged, but the techniques and what the people wore and whatever makes it really interesting to go that far back in history. And his daughter and I became great friends, and she got to go to the big premiere of the movie at the Grandin Theater back in 2016 and stand up and everybody clapped for her because she's interviewed in the movie and talked about her dad going in Murder Hole. And she said one of their stories was they were just going down an old manila rope ladder. They had a rope ladder, that's what it was. And so they climbed down the 75 feet to the lower level and did some exploring. And when they came back, because the weight of the men that had gone down, you know, it kind of pulled the rope ladder down. But when they came back to climb up out of the rope using the rope ladder, it had lost its stretch and it was up high. They could barely reach it. So one of the men had to stand on the other shoulders to reach up and pull that rope so they could get out. They didn't even think about that. So she passed away about 2 years ago at the age of 100, but we stayed friends, and she loved to tell stories. And he had pictures of her in a white church dress and a white church hat. There's one in there standing halfway down the talus slope on the way down. So I don't know how in the world they got in and out of there, by the driveway. It's a miracle. And we've had people from as far as New Zealand, Russia, Poland, all over the United States come and visit our cave. And when you belong to the NSS, the National Speleological Society, like we do, they have a convention in a different state every year. So when the convention has been here in Virginia and in West Virginia, a lot of times people will come a little bit early or stay late and come, and we'll organize a trip for them. So I actually got to go to New Zealand and go caving with fellow cavers, because it's a family, all over the world really, who are interested in the underground. There are so many facets to caving, just like with those conventions I was talking about. We do art of caves. I do cave art. We write songs about caves. People do mapping of caves. They do conservation. So there's something for everybody. And even the book or the movie, you don't really have to be a caver or know about caving to just kind of be fascinated about all the stories of people going in and get stuck, or there's poems that people have written about. And it's just a fascinating subject, I think. A deep subject. A deep subject. Murder Hole is more than just a hole in the ground to us. It is a unique, infamous landmark in Virginia. It has inspired stories and music and artwork and people to find out what they are capable of, overcoming fears, learning to do teamwork. It has enabled us to meet people literally from all over the world, to share the love of doing that type of thing. And we are honored to be stewards of it, because it has its own personality, and it's so special. And what I'm proudest most of all about the Murder Hole is leaving behind a book and with help of Dave Saki, who was the videographer, a documentary movie, 28-minute documentary, for whoever ends up having this property when my husband and I are long gone, kind of like an owner's manual, to be able to appreciate the history of it, the mystery of it, and what just a very special place it is. And maybe it sums up, although this is Gravelly Ridge, we call our property Miracle Ridge, because we feel like it was a miracle, my husband and I do, that we met each other, but also that the land sat for sale until we came along. It was like it was waiting for us. And so we've tried to do our best to really take good care of it and share it in a safe way and in a way that everybody can appreciate it.